Hi, my name is Carson Gall and welcome to my channel. I'm a food photographer and a stylist. Today I'm going to go through one of my shoots step by step, from making the food to setting it up to shooting it and the editing process that I use. My setup that I have is pretty ideal for beginners because I don't use a lot of fancy and expensive equipment to get the shots that I get. Everything I use is very low cost but still very effective, and I found that you can use these low cost alternatives and still get the same results if you are creative enough to use it in the right way. When I first started photography, I didn't have any fancy setup. I didn't know anything about composition, lighting, any of that stuff. In fact, my first picture was a really unappetizing looking picture of a curry that I had made without any lighting, without any thoughts of composition or anything, and I just shot it on an iPhone. And now I'm actually able to take pictures that are restaurant and company quality pictures, and I've been able to secure a couple jobs in this field. I'm hoping that seeing my step-by-step process will help you increase your skill in food photography and create pictures that you're more proud of and that you're confident in to take to a restaurant or to a company to kind of pitch your work and to sell yourself to these companies to get jobs and secure these jobs that you're looking for in food photography. Today I'm going to be making a recipe from Cupful of Kale's Instagram. It's a orange loaf cake and I'm really excited to see how it turns out. So here's my setup that I ended up using for this shot. I have the cake right there with all the orange slices, and I chopped a bit of my lavender off for the garnish on the cake. We also had the tripod set up right here, and I always shoot portrait. I don't really like shooting landscape for my posts that I have, just because most of the time clients want it in portrait, and Instagram posts do better in portrait as well. So with my composition here, I wanted to have the cake be the star of the show, and we have all of these oranges leading to the cake, so they're all using the concept of leading lines to go to the cake. And then I have a grid view on my camera to show where exactly lines intersect and that sort of thing, and that helps with composition as well because it makes sure that you're placing items in the place where it is most appealing to those looking at it. And my backdrop is from Ink and Elm, and I just use it over my dryer because that's the only space I have to shoot here. And I have natural light coming in right here. That did create quite a harsh shadow on the side of the cake right here. So I did end up using this reflector. It's a cheap 3-in-1 deflector. It also can be used as a diffuser for light, and it's just on Amazon. It's super cheap and super affordable. The background that I have here is just a trifold board, and I taped one of my backdrops to it to create a white background because I don't have a background that I have to stand up for a white shot, and we wanted this shot to be a lot brighter and a lot cleaner looking. So here's a little bit of the behind the scenes of the shoot. You can see I'm pouring with one hand and I have my trigger set up, in my other hand I have it on my phone and just connected via Bluetooth because my camera has those capabilities. And I always shoot portrait like I said before, and yeah, this is just the process towards the end of my shoot, just trying to get as many pictures as I can, just trying to give myself as many options as I can for what I want to end up using, and just, yeah, more options is always better. So that's it for the shoot today. I usually get more than one angle, and today I got just the 45-degree angle with the pour shot as well, just to kind of have two options to choose from when we're editing, see which one we like better. Typically, I would prefer to do a top-down shot as well, but I felt like this one kind of lended itself better to the 45. If it was a round cake, I probably would have done a top-down as well, because those are really fun to work with circles and that sort of thing in flat lay composition. Now we're gonna move on to the editing of these pictures. I use the desktop version of Lightroom Classic. I just import the pictures and work with the RAW format. I don't really like working with the JPEG just because I feel like it doesn't give you as much flexibility with the images. And since I have this space, I prefer to just edit the RAW files instead of bringing in the JPEGs. I do typically shoot in RAW and JPEG though, just to have both options, because some clients want a smaller format and some of them don't want the bigger file that the RAW does leave you with. Okay, so we're gonna import this video into Lightroom, and what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna crop all of the pictures to a 4:5 aspect ratio, because that is the dimensions of an Instagram post. So I'm just gonna do that with all of them quickly. So then I'm gonna start down at the lens correction option, and I'm gonna click that because it just gets rid of some of the distortion that is created automatically by the lens. And then I'm gonna go up to the tone curve right here, and then I'm going to work with the number adjustment instead of the linear adjustment, because I just find it's easier and I like to have that added control on my image. So I'm going to lighten up the darks and the shadows a bit, as well as the lights and highlights. I just find that this works especially well for the pictures that you're trying to get kind of feel more light and airy, because you just want it to overall be a bit lighter, and that helps lighten it up without going overboard and kind of burning the image. And likewise, we're going to raise the whites and the blacks a bit, just because you don't want a pure black on your image, just because it's quite harsh. The shadows I'm going to lower a bit just to add a bit more contrast. And then, as you can see, when you raise the highlights too much, it just kind of burns that side of the cake, so you don't want that to be super high at all, because you can lighten the image in other ways. So here's a little before and after already of what we have. I am going to add a bit of dehaze, just because the pictures always end up looking a bit hazy when it comes out of a camera, and especially when you post to a platform like Instagram. When it does that though, it does darken the picture down a bit, so we're going to raise the whites and the blacks a bit more to brighten up that picture. Likewise, I like to up the clarity and the texture just a little bit, because it just adds a little bit more sharpness in the photo without going overboard. And I like having vibrant colors, but I don't like them being super, super bright, so I just bring the vibrance up and the saturation down a bit. And then after I play with those a bit, I come down to the individual color corrections, and there's actually a lot of blue in my backdrop, so I like to decrease the saturation in that and just lighten it up a bit as well to brighten the entire picture a bit. I'm gonna make the greens a bit more vibrant as well, just because I like them to pop out and stand out, as they're a bit of an accent color to the oranges that we have in the picture. And I'm also gonna take the oranges down a bit, I think, just because they are looking a bit too vibrant. And then the cake is quite yellow, so we're gonna take that down a bit, but brighten it up as well. And that's looking like it's kind of washing out the oranges a bit, so I'm going to go back in actually and correct that. I wasn't expecting there to be so much yellow in the oranges, but it's turning out okay still. So now we have the before and after of what we've done so far. And I am going to brighten it up just a bit more because it feels a bit dark still in the background, and we want this picture to be very light and bright. And if you can see in that back left corner, it is really dark. That's probably because of the trifold board I was using, so we're just going to add a linear filter right here to brighten it up. So from one of my previous pictures that I edited, the color is quite orange, so we're just going to take that down to have no color. And then it's brightened a bit too much. It's set to automatically brighten to an exposure of 1. So we're gonna just bring that down a bit to about 0.7 or so, just to make sure it is bright but not too overly bright to where it's kind of unbalancing the image. And we'll probably take the shadows up a bit as well, just because that corner is full of a lot of shadows. And this will kind of help just give it a more natural brightness instead of a fake one that the exposure sometimes gives. And then these oranges right here are very bright and very washed out, so we're gonna add a radial filter to those to take the exposure down. And for this one, it should work just taking the exposure down, but we need to get rid of that orange color again, and we need to invert it as well, so it's applied to the oranges and not the rest of the image. So we're just gonna go up and take the exposure down past 0, probably into -5 or so. -0.5, excuse me. And then that should be good, I think. So now I'm just going to take the crop in a little bit just to tighten up the image. It just feels like there's a lot of negative space going on when I want it to kind of be more focused on the subject instead of the negative space, because there are times where it is good to focus on that space, but I don't think that's what I'm going for this one. And then the last thing I usually do with my images is increase the sharpening, just because with platforms like Instagram and Facebook, when you do post it, it loses a lot of its quality, and sharpening kind of just helps preserve a little bit of that. So here's another before and after. And then I'm gonna create a preset. Since all my shots were taken in the same lighting, it should be pretty spot on for each one. I might just have to make small adjustments with radial and linear filters. So I'm just going to apply that to the rest of these. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through with the hue adjustments for the highlights, just because I feel like the picture is a tad bit too warm, so I'm going to take that into the teal range and then up the saturation of that just to overlay it with a bit of a cooler light to complement the oranges, because I don't usually like my pictures looking too warm. And since the picture is largely made of highlights, I'm just going to do that then with the highlights and not bother with the shadows. Otherwise, if it was a moodier picture, I would have gone with the shadows instead of the highlights to kind of tint those instead. And for all of these pictures, you can see which one I end up picking to post on my Instagram. If you just go onto Instagram and search at SporkFed, I will be posting these today, so you can see which one I ended up going with and what the finished product ended up looking like. And now I'm just going to export these all. So I just command click all of them, go to export, and then choose the location you want it in. I always have the same one chosen because I don't really export for anything else. But you can go through here and just choose where you want it to go. And then you can add a name to it so you don't have to go through and rename it later. And then it will just export all of those to that location for you. And yeah, so that is my editing process. So that's it for today's video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope that it was very helpful to you. Let me know in the comments if you have any more questions about clarifications of my shoot, what I'm using, what I'm doing, and why I'm doing it. I'd be happy to respond to each one of them. If you did find this video helpful and enjoyable, please give it a like and please feel free to subscribe. I'm going to be coming out with more videos similar to this, kind of taking you through what I do as a food photographer, the steps I take to make sure my pictures are the best quality that they can be, and the different measures that I'm taking to ensure that I'm coming up with new content that is consistent with me and my brand as well as the brand of the companies and restaurants that I work with. Thank you guys. See you later.